Hi, everyone, and welcome to the special simulcast of the Neil Haley Show and Growing Older with Enthusiasm with Ron Kaiser, Dr. Ron Kaiser. Dr. Ron, how are you? And we're going to have another amazing guest today.
Doing great. Looking forward to our guest today.
Excellent. And are you a pickleball player, Dr. Ron, by the way? I've never played pickleball. This is why I'm so intrigued by learning about this.
I've never played. A few of my neighbors are. I'm really interested in learning about it and whether somebody who's missing an ACL and has an artificial hip can play. But I know it's sweeping the country, so I'm really looking forward to hearing about it.
All right, so our guest today is Carl Landau. Carl, thanks for stopping by. And I know Dr. Ron has his first question for you.
Okay. Sure. Well, first of all, greetings, Carl. It's great to have you with us. And just so, without getting too complex about it, I have to assume that there are a number of people who are hearing about pickleball, if not for the first time, just don't know what it is. And, when you don't know what something is, we don't want to have conversation in the background about assuming that we know. So can you give us the Cliff Notes version of just what is pickleball?
Sure. Pickleball is a combination of tennis and ping pong and badminton. It's basically a much smaller version of a tennis court. It's about a third of the size of a tennis court. And you basically play doubles. So particularly that's why it is like so popular. The net is like a little lower than the tennis net. It's very similar as far as court wise to a tennis court, except if you took it miniature, and almost everyone plays doubles. So the amount of room that you need to cover is not all that great. You use a paddle rather than a tennis racket. And a lot of it, like when you service underhand. So it's a game. Oh, and also use basically a wiffle ball that you hit. So that ball doesn't go real far. So you hit the ball and, it lands. And basically anyone can play. You don't have to be a great athlete to play, but it's just really fun. And it's a very social sport. And because of baby boomers, it came from a very niche sport that no one really knew much about because it was invented in the mid 60s. And it's just been in the past 4 or 5 years where it's really popular. And today there's over 5 million people in the US playing pickleball, and it's the fastest growing sport in America. So it's sort of crazy. And there's predictions in the next 5, 6 years that number of 5 million is going to go to 30 million.
Wow. When is ESPN going to get a contract for this, right?
They already do.
They already do.
Oh, it's on ESPN, it's on Fox Sports, it's on CBS Sports, it's on the tennis channel. It's everywhere.
And do you see lots of people, so they play it. Where can I find a game of pickleball? Let's say in Dallas, where would you find something like this? Because again, this is the problem. I've never heard of this till, again, my client Gary Sirac told me, hey, by the way, Neil, I have great interest in this pickleball. And I'm trying to act like, oh yeah, I've heard of it, but I really haven't. So yeah, it's still not mainstream, but it's on its way, it sounds like.
Well, it is. And if you were in Dallas, I'll guarantee you there's probably 50, 60 places you could play pickleball. So it's in parks, it's in, clubs, it's at YMCA's. It's people build pickleball courts in their backyard. People have them in their street, in their courtyard. I mean, it's everywhere. And there's a lot of, if you just Googled where you are, pickleball courts near you, there's going to be a bunch of courts within 5 miles, guarantee you.
Is there any obvious reason why, if it's been around for like 60 years, any obvious reason why it's caught on so rapidly? Because I know a number of neighbors play it, and it's from not hearing about it to knowing so many people that play. There's got to be some kind of impetus for it.
Yeah, no, there is. So, like I said, it started in the mid '60s, like actually up in the state of Washington. It was there was a congressman. He was on vacation with three other families. They were bored. The kids were bored, and this guy invented the sport. And really, it hardly anyone played it for all this time. And it's really, the tremendous amount of baby boomers that we have. So there there are 10,000 people a day turning 65. And that's going, and that's been going on for about 8 years, and it's going to go on for another 5 or 6 years. And so it was, a bunch of baby boomers started playing it like 4 or 5 years ago. And these are the people that have all the money and the influence, in the country. And it's like this little revolution that has started. And anyway, it's just sort of taken off. The hugest boom was during the pandemic. So remember, we were all locked in our houses and all that. Well, pickleball is very safe. There's no physical contact of people. The most physical contact is you take your paddle and you just at the end of a game, you just give a little nudge to everyone's paddle. You do that at the end of the game. And so it boomed. It went from 3 million to 5 million in the past 2 years from the pandemic. And the growth is phenomenal. Cities are putting tons of money into new pickleball courts. There were all these tennis courts that no one used for years and years. And all of a sudden, you could take one tennis court and build 4 pickleball courts. And then you have 16 people playing on that. And it's just gone crazy, and it's gonna go more. I mean, it's like everywhere now.
Is it like some of the other sports in terms of you have some real competitors, but people can have a good time without, you know, being all that competitive, or is it more like yoga where it's not competitive at all,
Yeah.
or what?
It's Ron, it's whatever you want to do. So if you want to just have fun with your friends, and have a lot of laughs and just it's called dinking the ball. You can do that. And if you're a competitive person, there's tournaments all over, every city, and there's national tournaments. And in fact, there's 2 professional pickleball leagues. So LeBron James just bought a team.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh.
yeah, Kevin Durant bought a team. Tom Brady bought a team. So, and this just happened like 2, 3 months ago. All these professional players have started buying teams because there's 2 professional leagues, and it's on TV all the time. So, and there's such heavy investment. I mean, it's by, well, like you said, particularly cities and parks, that there's no stopping it. And in country clubs, like, they're taking a lot of their tennis courts that people aren't using and converting them to pickleball. And I think part of the reason is that the popularity is the social aspect. And Dr. Ron, I'm sure you understand, as people get older, being social is really important. If you want to have a healthy life, you need to have a active social life. And I'll just tell you myself, I live in Sacramento, and I had my own company, and traveled around the country. And I've only lived here 10 years. I knew 4 or 5 people here, because all my friends were all around the country where I used to put on live events. And I joined a pickleball club, and within a month, I had 15 good friends, and I see them all the time, not just at pickleball. We, meet together, all the time. And I would never have met these people because they all come from different backgrounds, and, they're all, economically different and racially different, and, politically different. And I would never have met them if it wasn't for pickleball. And there's a lot of articles around, is pickleball going to save America? Because you play with these people, you don't care anything about, like, any of that stuff, that it would never even come up. And it's also like a really polite game where there's it's you really appreciate, and someone plays a good game. And that's as far as like, if you want to make friends and all that, just be polite, and and know the rules. And it's not even so much like, oh, that person's so much better than that. In sports generally, it's like that's how you're rated. And I think in pickleball it's more an etiquette thing, like you're a good guy or a good woman playing. And the other thing about it is, with men and women, it's really equal. It's not a strength game at all. So I've had a lot of women kick my butts in pickleball because it's much more strategic than like strength or speed. And anyway, there's a million reasons why it's
It's
great.
wow.
That's really, I'm really glad to hear about the social aspects of it, because, it is a critically important thing for people as they get into their life second half century, particularly if they've been spending their time, working, and
Yeah.
they don't have much of an outside social life. But the other question that comes to mind is, uh, actually got two that are related. One is just in terms of assuming your arms are okay.
Hmm.
Are there, do we have to be concerned about physical issues if we have knee problems or back problems or stuff like that, or is it modifiable? And the other question that comes to mind is what about equipment and
Hmm.
costs and
Yeah.
stuff like that?
Yeah. Well, I'll take the second question first. As far as cost, it's really minimal. You need to buy a paddle. A paddle costs anywhere from $60 to $120. And then you need pickleball balls, and you get three for about $8. So you're done. That's all the equipment you need. So one paddle, and you need pick balls. So that's the entry into pickleball is very inexpensive. And so that's part of the appeal too. And I always carry a spare pickleball paddle with me, because uh, there's always someone who will walk by the park, that you're playing. They're like, "What is that?" And I'll talk to them. They're like, "Wow, that seems really cool." I just pull out a paddle and put them on the court, and within 30 minutes of playing pickleball, the first time, and you just teaching someone, they can actually play a decent game. I think that's the one of the big appeals too. Just thinking of all the other sports and how long it takes, like golf, you can play for 30 years and still be a crappy golf player.
Absolutely.
So anyway, as far as modifications, there are people there's wheelchair pickball, and there's tournaments that like people in wheelchairs are. The rules and all that they've adopted, depending what their disability is and stuff like that. Um, so the wear and tear on the body is not that bad, but I mean, it's like any sport, you have to be really careful. And when I teach people how to play, that's the very first thing I say is like, don't be a hero. You're not 18 years old. If someone hits some great smash and it's like, going out, and, to the baseline, just say, tip your hat. Oh, that's a great shot. And don't be a hero. So, that's the most important thing, because you can get hurt, because it's a lot of lateral movement. These are movements you don't generally do. So people need to be careful the first couple times they play pickleball.
Only other question I have in this area, although I have another one for you, Carl,
Yeah.
just generally, but uh, is there any significance to the name? Where does pickle come from in
I know
pickle?
it's a really goofy name, and no one knows 100% why. Because I told you it was 1965. It was like some dads that came up with this game to keep their bored kids happy. And there's two theories. One is one of the families had a dog named Pickle, and but that is not true, because the dog came around 5 years after they had invented the game. So the supposedly the real reason why it's called that is There's some sort of boats. They're like sort of like tugboats, and they're called pickle boats. And that's where it comes from, because this is up, by Seattle, and there's all the, where there's a lot of boating and all that. So it's supposedly named after these boats that are like tugboats, and they're called pickle boats. So anyway, it's not a great, origin story or anything like that. But everyone wonders because it is such a goofy name, and it has nothing to do with the game at all. You don't eat pickles on the court. You don't do any of that sort of stuff.
Wow, I think it's a great sport, as Ron was talking about, socialization, but something that a lot of older adult communities should start to have, set those things up in more and more places so that it's out there, because it's a sport. You said you don't have to have huge athleticism to play, right?
Right,
So,
right. And I'll tell you, Neil, I would wager to guess any 50 plus community, they all have pickleball courts. I mean, they have multiple pickleball courts. I mean, so that's one of the appeals. Like when people are looking at a community, the first question people have: do you have pickleball courts? And they're way less expensive to build. Just imagine, it's like, these courts are pretty tiny compared to building a tennis court or something like that. So anyway, there's a lot of reasons why it's great.
Well, I don't know if you have any more pickleball questions, Neil. I have a
sure.
question.
I don't have any more pickleballs. So
well, the only thing I want to say is, the reason I know something about this besides playing it, I mean, I'm co-author of Pickleball for Dummies. So, the Dummy series, there's literally 3,000 titles of dummy books. And we wrote the first one. It's called Pickleball for Dummies. And it is flying off the bookshelves. It's Wiley is the publisher, and it debuted as the #4 dummy book in sales. And like I said, the 3,000 titles of dummy books. So it is hot.
People get it.
Well, it's on Amazon, of course, and it's in all Barnes and Nobles around the country. It's in a lot of independent bookstores. I have a company. It's called Pickleball Media, if people want to Google that. And we have a section on the book in there. So anyway, we're really excited. We had no idea the success that we've had. We're already in our third printing, and the book has been out for 15 days. So they're right now printing the third time.
Wow. And I know, while it may be hard to believe, your life isn't all about pickleball. I know you have a podcast.
Yeah.
So I think my final question is, can you tell us what it is, where it is, and what it's about?
Yeah, it's called I Used to Be Somebody. So that whole title came from what I would say, because my background, I was a magazine publisher for a long time. I started, and more importantly, sold 5 niche magazines.
Oh, wow.
In the computer field. In the early days, in the early 80s, I started one of the first computer magazines. And then I had magazines in micro brew industry in the 90s and sold that. And so for the past 20 years, I put on live events for these niche publishers, like very vertical kinds of magazines. And people would say, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I used to be somebody, because I used to be a publisher. I never considered putting on these events. I mean, it was hard work and all that, but it's not as exciting as like when I was a publisher. So I'm on my 63rd episode of it, and it's pretty popular. I used to be somebody, and I interview people that have had big time careers, and now they're, for the most part, nearing retirement age, but they really got a lot out of, their job. A lot of them were entrepreneurs or corporate executives, and in some ways define them. And the idea of just being retired, and particularly if you really enjoyed your work, sounds terrible. Like, to me, I sold my last company like a year before the pandemic, and everyone's saying, well, Carl, like, what are you going to do in retirement? And what I thought when they say that is like, well, you're done. You're like a horse going to pasture. And that thought sounded terrible to me. So I started this podcast and people love it. And I've had, a lot of big time athletes and entertainers and all sorts of people on the show. But now in their second act, they're doing something entirely different. And I think that's what really gets people excited about doing something new, and sort of challenging themselves. So the podcast has done really well.
Great, and you obviously still are somebody, and we have something in common. I know when I left uh, my job at the medical school, one of the I I'd had a newsletter to my list, and one of the things that I told people is, whatever you say, don't congratulate me on retirement,
Hmm.
because that isn't where I'm going. I'm in a different phase of life, and I
Yeah.
think that you certainly exemplify it. Uh, Run out of my questions, so I just want to tell you how much I appreciate your sharing your knowledge and story with us, Neil. It's
Carl, I mean, it's fantastic and it's an honor that you would say I was somebody. I think I'm somebody now, but I'm not retiring from this at all, Carl, when it
Right.
comes to my celebrity interviews and different things. But yeah, I mean, I retired in wrestling just for Dr. Ron to understand. At 29 years old, I walked away in Bremen, Germany at the peak of my career to go
Yeah.
on and become a teacher.
Yeah.
So that's the process, but that's really not where it ended up being. I ended up veering back in entertainment, but in a much different way. And now my brand is the media giant.
Right.
So
Right.
it's really an exciting time next, and I could be back in the ring again. So that, don't ever say wrestlers never retire. If you've watched a lot of the documentaries, they come back. I think Ric Flair retired for 15th time, right? Or something crazy like that. He'll be back
Right.
in another month. But there's guys, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat is coming back in the ring at 72.
Oh my
He's been
God.
out for it's so long. So there's no retirement in wrestling. There's just a little bit of a break. I've had a 25-year break, but I still could come back. But I appreciate it, Carl. Best place again, people connect with you is where?
Uh, just Google Pickleball Media, and you'll find me. And I'm on LinkedIn, Carl Landau. But just go to Pickleball Media, and you can hear all about the book and Pickleball for Dummies, and also the podcast. I used to be somebody.
All right, Ron, that was a great guest. Really educated us. And again, for your older community, if they're not playing pickleball, they need to start now. Carl, you might be assuming things. That would be an interesting LinkedIn. How many people play pickleball? You should put that out on LinkedIn and see out of your connections on LinkedIn. That's the only place it does it. Or Twitter, how many people play pickleball? Yes or no? Because I never heard of it till Gary introduced me to it, and I can't wait to check out your book. So I appreciate it.
Anyway, thanks a lot, Neil. And thanks, Dr. Ron. Really appreciate it.
All right. That
Thank
was
you.
Growing Older with Enthusiasm, guys. Take care.